So factoring trinomials is basically going in the reverse. We need to decompose our multiplication back to its length and width. So when we talk about factoring, we have these two binomials, and basically we know that if we have the type where it's just an x squared, we know that we really just need to worry about these two numbers here. Okay, these two numbers here are going to multiply to c and add to b. Okay, so that we can then go backwards and work this out. So we can ask ourselves, what two numbers multiply to 2 and add to 3? Well, those are going to be 3 and 1. And we can show that in our grid here, because we know that that's going to be x squared. The constant term 2 is the two constant terms being multiplied together. So it's going to be this length and this length. And we know that the multiplies to 2, and these are going to be the x's that come from this length here that multiplies the factor of 2, and this length here, this x is going to come from this length here, which multiplies to 2. So it's the factors of 2 that add to those two terms. So we end up with 2x and x. Okay, so here the common factor is 1, here the common factor is 2, and we get common factor of x going this way, common factor of x going this way. So x plus 1, x plus 2. Now this isn't, we don't necessarily need this if we know that rule, but again, it's important for you to understand this rectangle because we're going to use this a lot. So here we end up with two numbers that multiply to 36 add to negative 12. Well, I'm thinking this is 6 and 6. Okay, so when I draw this out, I have x squared, 36. I know that's got to be, these have got to be negative, so I need negative 6, negative 6. This has to be x and x to get the x squared. And we get negative 6x, negative 6x. Yeah, that works. So we end up with x minus 6, or since it's a perfect square, we can write it as a square. Okay, since we know that it's symmetrical, so it's a square shape. So when we have a minus in here, that means that to get this negative, we have to have a positive and a negative that multiply to this negative c. And that means when we combine the like terms, the middle term has to be a difference. Okay, so when I draw this out, I have this. I've got x squared, negative 14. And I know that this is going to be x and x to get the x squared. To get 14 here, I need to have 2 times 7, or 1 times 14. Well, in order to make this work, I need a minus 2 here to get the negative 2x. And this is going to be positive here. So to get the negative 14, one has to be negative, one has to be positive. And when I combine these two together, this and this, it has to add to the 5x. So the difference in these two absolute value terms of 2 and 7 is going to give me the 5, and that gives me the split. Okay, and what really is important is, in fact, the split. How do I split up the 5x into 7 and negative 2? So here I need to think what two numbers multiply to 35 and have a difference of 2, because when we split it, okay, one of them has to be positive, one of them has to be negative, so we have to have a difference of negative 2. So when we do this, again, I have my square. I need to get negative 35 here. So to get negative 35, I have to use negative 7. Okay, that gives me my negative 7x. This factor over here must be plus 5. And the plus 5 factor, the negative 7x, combined to negative 2. So I end up with x minus 7, x plus 5, and that's my factored form. And that gives me my length and width. And it has to be consistent. It has to fit into the box. If it doesn't, then something's wrong. Because visually, if it doesn't physically work, something's wrong with it algebraically.